They were considered the ultimate warriors, masters of discipline, honor, and death. But when exhaustion struck on blood-soaked battlefields, these legendary fighters faced their most vulnerable moment: sleep. How do you close your eyes when enemies lurk in every shadow? How do you surrender consciousness when a single mistake means death? The samurai developed sleeping techniques so sophisticated, so psychologically brutal, that they could rest in the middle of active war zones while remaining ready to kill within seconds of waking. But these methods came with a price that would haunt them for life. Picture this. It's 1274 during the Mongol invasions. Thousands of enemy soldiers patrol the coastlines of Kyushu. The samurai have been fighting for days without rest, their katanas stained with blood, their armor heavy with exhaustion. Yet somehow they managed to sleep. Not just survive the night, but sleep so effectively that they could wake up and continue slaughtering with precision. The truth about samurai battlefield sleeping isn't found in any honor code or Bushido manual. It's buried in psychological techniques that modern military forces still study today. Techniques that transformed the human sleep cycle into a weapon. But what really happened during those dark hours between battles was far more disturbing than anyone expected. Medieval Japan was a landscape of constant warfare. From the Heian period through the Sengoku era, samurai spent more nights on battlefields than in their own beds. These weren't brief skirmishes. Campaigns could last months, even years. Sleep deprivation wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a death sentence. The samurai class emerged in the 9th century, but their most brutal battlefield innovations came during the 13th to 16th centuries, when warfare became industrialized. Massive armies clashed across rice paddies and mountain passes, leaving thousands of corpses in their wake. In this hellscape, the ability to rest without dying became as important as swordsmanship itself. But the samurai weren't just warriors, they were also deeply spiritual, following Zen Buddhism and Shinto beliefs that viewed sleep as a form of temporary death. This created a psychological paradox that would shape their most disturbing survival techniques: the art of death sleep. The samurai called it shi no nemuri tsunoda, death sleep. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a literal practice of sleeping so lightly that they could kill before fully waking up. According to the war diary of Takeda Shingen from 1553, samurai would train themselves to sleep in 20-minute intervals, never entering deep sleep. They practiced a technique called fragmentary consciousness, keeping one part of their mind awake while the body rested. Modern sleep researchers recognize this as a form of unihemispheric slow-wave sleep, similar to how dolphins and whales rest. But the samurai took this further. They would sleep with their wakizashi, the shorter sword, clutched in their dominant hand, positioned so that any movement would trigger an automatic stabbing motion. The blade was always pointed toward the most likely direction of attack. Some warriors trained so extensively that they could decapitate an enemy while still technically asleep. Matsudaira Ietada's battle records from the siege of Odawara describe samurai who killed 3 ninja assassins in their sleep, literally without waking up. The bodies were found at dawn, perfectly positioned around the sleeping warrior's mat, each killed with a single precise strike. The psychological cost was devastating. Many samurai reported never feeling truly rested for the remainder of their lives, even decades after their last battle. The buddy system of mutual survival. No samurai slept alone. The sleep guard rotation system was more complex than any military protocol used today. Groups of 4 to 6 warriors would arrange themselves in specific geometric patterns, usually a pentagon or hexagon, with each warrior responsible for monitoring specific angles of approach. But here's where it gets disturbing. They didn't just watch each other sleep. They practiced a technique called breath synchronization, where the entire group would match their breathing patterns. This created a form of collective unconsciousness that allowed them to share awareness even while resting. The chronicles of Imagawa Yoshimoto from 1560 detail how samurai sleep groups would sometimes experience shared dreams, prophetic visions of the next day's battle that proved unnaturally accurate. Modern neuroscience suggests this was likely a form of synchronized REM sleep induced by extreme stress and shared breathing patterns. The most chilling aspect was the mercy protocol. If a samurai in the group was too injured or sick to wake up quickly enough, the others were trained to kill him in his sleep rather than let enemies capture and torture him. The Hojo clan records show this happened regularly during the siege of Katsurayama Castle in 1557. Some warriors became so psychologically dependent on group sleeping that they couldn't rest alone for the rest of their lives. They would hire peasants just to breathe nearby while they slept. The armor that never came off. Samurai didn't undress to sleep, ever. Their battlefield sleeping positions were designed around wearing full armor for weeks at a time. The typical samurai would sleep in what was called tate no kamae, the standing position, literally sleeping while standing up, leaning against trees, rocks, or their own spears. The armor itself was designed for this. The do, chest plate, had special internal cushioning that prevented the metal from cutting into the ribs during extended wear. The shoulder guards were articulated to allow the arms to rest while still maintaining defensive positioning, but the psychological adaptation was even more extreme. According to the personal journals of Oda Nobunaga's retainers, samurai would sometimes sleep in their armor for so long that removing it became physically impossible. The skin would grow around the leather bindings. The metal would leave permanent indentations in their flesh. Some warriors died when their armor was finally removed after campaigns, their bodies unable to function without the external support structure. The sokutai armor position, sleeping while sitting cross-legged with the katana across the knees, became so ingrained that many samurai couldn't sleep lying down for the rest of their lives. They would spend their retirement years sleeping upright in chairs, their bodies permanently shaped by decades of vertical rest. But the most disturbing discovery came from excavations at the Sekigahara battlefield in 1982. Archaeologists found samurai skeletons still in perfect sleeping positions, suggesting they died in their sleep and were never disturbed by scavengers, perhaps because they looked ready to attack even in death. The psychological conditioning, the mental preparation for battlefield sleeping began in childhood. Young samurai were subjected to a training regimen called Kyofu no Neru, fear sleeping. They would be forced to sleep in graveyards, haunted temples, and locations where battles had recently occurred. The training escalated progressively. First, they slept near corpses, then among corpses. Finally, they would sleep while lying directly on top of dead bodies, training themselves to find rest even surrounded by death and decay. The psychological scarring was intentional. It created warriors who could sleep anywhere, under any conditions. Master swordsman Miyamoto Musashi wrote in his secret teachings that the ideal samurai should be able to sleep in the mouth of a tiger, on the blade of a sword, in the embrace of death itself. His personal practice involved sleeping in different positions every night, sometimes hanging from tree branches, sometimes buried partially underground, sometimes floating in rice paddies. The most extreme form was called Yuma no Shi, dream death. Samurai would practice entering a sleep state so deep it appeared identical to death, complete with slowed breathing and barely detectable pulse. This allowed them to hide among battlefield corpses and ambush enemies who came to loot the dead, but the technique came with a terrible risk. The Takeda clan records from 1575 mention at least 12 warriors who entered Yume no Shi and never woke up. Their bodies found days later, apparently having died while practicing the technique. The night raids and sleep assassinations. Sleep became a weapon itself. Samurai developed an entire martial art around attacking sleeping enemies and defending against sleep attacks. The techniques were so sophisticated that they influenced modern special forces training. The silent step methods allowed samurai to move through enemy camps without making any sound. They studied the sleep patterns of different types of warriors, learning to identify the deepest sleep phases by observing breathing patterns and body positioning. The optimal killing time was determined to be exactly 90 minutes after the target fell asleep, during the first REM cycle when the victim was least likely to wake up. But the most chilling innovation was the sleep poison. Samurai would coat their weapons with extracts from the yamadori mushroom, which caused paralysis but left the victim conscious. Enemies would wake up unable to move or scream, forced to watch their own execution. The Wasugi clan used this technique extensively during the Battle of Kawanakajima, leaving hundreds of paralyzed enemies to die slowly at sunrise. The defensive countermeasures were equally brutal. Samurai developed the ability to kill while sleepwalking, literally. They would set psychological triggers that would cause them to attack anyone who approached during specific sleep phases. The Shimazu family records describe a warrior who killed his own son when the boy tried to wake him for an emergency. Some samurai became so paranoid about sleep attacks that they would booby-trap their own sleeping areas with concealed blades and pressure-sensitive spears. The area around a sleeping samurai became a death trap that could kill friend or foe indiscriminately. The spiritual dimension of warrior sleep. Sleep for the samurai wasn't just rest, it was a spiritual journey into the realm of death and back. They practiced a form of meditation called Shi no Satori, death enlightenment, that blurred the line between sleeping, dying, and achieving spiritual awakening. The technique involved deliberately inducing near-death experiences during sleep. Samurai would use controlled breathing methods to slow their heart rate to dangerous levels, allowing their consciousness to visit the spirit world while their bodies remained on the battlefield. They believed this gave them supernatural awareness of enemy movements and battle outcomes. Zen master Takuan Soho, advisor to many samurai, wrote that the perfect warrior should sleep with one foot in this world and one foot in the next. This wasn't metaphorical, it was a literal practice involving partial asphyxiation techniques that induced hallucinations and out-of-body experiences. The spiritual preparation involved months of training in Zen temples where monks would bury samurai alive for increasing periods of time, teaching them to find peace in the grave. Some warriors became so addicted to these near-death experiences that they couldn't function without regularly risking their lives during sleep. The most famous practitioner was Yamamoto Tsunetomo, who claimed he could die and be reborn every night, gaining prophetic knowledge about the next day's battles. His technique involved hanging himself to the point of unconsciousness, then being revived by servants, a practice he continued for over 30 years. But the spiritual dimension had a dark side. Many samurai became convinced they were already dead, leading to a psychological condition where they felt like ghosts haunting their own lives. This living death syndrome contributed to the high suicide rates among retired warriors. The ultimate test: sleeping during the siege of Osaka. The winter siege of Osaka Castle in 1614 became the ultimate test of samurai sleeping techniques. Over 200,000 warriors were packed into a battlefield smaller than modern-day Tokyo Disneyland. There was no safe place to rest, no moment when death wasn't imminent. The siege lasted 140 days. Warriors went weeks without proper sleep, relying entirely on their training in death sleep and micro-rest techniques. The psychological pressure was so intense that many samurai began experiencing mass hallucinations. Seeing dead enemies rising from the battlefield, hearing the voices of their ancestors commanding them to fight. But the most disturbing event occurred on the 67th night of the siege. According to multiple eyewitness accounts, including the diary of Sanada Yukimura, an entire unit of 200 samurai fell into synchronized sleep, while standing guard on the castle walls. They remained in perfect formation, weapons ready, apparently alert, but completely unconscious. Enemy forces attempted to attack the sleeping guards 3 times that night. Each time, the sleeping samurai responded with perfect coordination, repelling the attacks without ever waking up. They fought an entire battle in their sleep, killing dozens of enemies while their minds remained in the death dream state. When dawn broke, the warriors had no memory of the night's events. They awoke to find enemy corpses scattered around their positions, their own weapons bloodied, but no conscious memory of the fighting. Some claimed they had dreamed of fighting ghosts. Others insisted they had battled alongside their deceased ancestors. Modern military psychologists studying the account believe it was the first documented case of combat sleepwalking induced by extreme stress and specialized training. But the samurai themselves believed they had achieved the ultimate warrior state, becoming living weapons that could kill even while dead. The siege ended in defeat for the defenders, but the sleeping samurai technique had evolved into something that transcended human limitations. They had learned to wage war across multiple states of consciousness simultaneously. The samurai sleeping techniques didn't end with the warrior class. Elements of their methods survived and evolved, influencing modern military training, meditation practices, and even sleep therapy. Navy SEALs still use modified versions of samurai micro-sleep techniques during extended operations. Buddhist monks practice forms of death meditation that trace directly back to samurai spiritual sleeping methods. But the psychological cost of these techniques was enormous. Post-battle records show that samurai who mastered battlefield sleeping often suffered from chronic insomnia, night terrors, and dissociative disorders for the rest of their lives. They had trained themselves so thoroughly to never fully rest that true peace became impossible. The ultimate irony is that warriors who mastered the art of sleeping without vulnerability became the most vulnerable of all, not to enemy attacks but to their own minds. They had weaponized rest itself, turning sleep from a refuge into another battlefield. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't how they managed to sleep surrounded by death, but whether they ever truly woke up. Many samurai reported feeling like they were sleepwalking through their entire lives, going through the motions of existence while their true selves remained trapped in that twilight state between sleep and death. Modern sleep researchers studying samurai techniques have found that extreme practitioners developed permanent changes in their brain structure, alterations that made normal human sleep patterns impossible. They had evolved beyond human limitations, but at the cost of their humanity itself. Were the samurai the ultimate warriors or the ultimate victims of their own perfection? Did they transcend human weakness, or did they sacrifice everything that made life worth living in pursuit of the perfect killing machine? The evidence suggests that in learning to sleep without fear, they lost the ability to live without it. They became ghosts in their own lives, warriors so perfectly adapted to death that they forgot how to be alive. What do you think? Was the price of perfect warrior discipline worth the cost? And in our modern world of constant stress and sleepless nights, are we unknowingly walking down the same path as those ancient masters of death sleep? Let me know in the comments which aspect of samurai battlefield survival you'd like to explore next. The truth about their eating habits during campaigns might be even more disturbing than their sleeping techniques.